Yo, this is Richie Mack, the Travel OG. I want to give a special shout out to Dante from Dontaesboxingnation, letting me put y'all up on game here in Thailand. Check this out.
What up, y'all? It's your boy Sheik Luch, LOXD Block. Listen, I need to shout out my homie Richie Mack, man, out there in Thailand. Yo, the bikini babes of the week. Richie Mack, you the Travel OG, King.
Sheik Luch tapping in. We got to get the lots for the golf tournament we having in Thailand, Pattaya City to be exact.
Dontaesboxingnation, Dontae's Cooking Nation. We are out here. Where are we at?
We're out here in Bangkok.
There you go. She's from Ireland. Matter of fact, introduce yourself to the world.
My name's Hannah and I'm from Ireland and I'm the biggest fan of Cooking Show.
You hear that?
Yeah.
Biggest fan?
And I'm from Ireland. Sorry.
No, I can edit it. Don't worry about it. All the way in Bangkok, Thailand, y'all.
No,
I'm gonna get
in
it right.
Ireland as well.
In Ireland. You hear that? DBN is international,
My
guys.
churros are ready now.
Dontaesboxingnation, what's going on, guys? Boy, oh boy, we got a lot to talk about in this video. A whole lot to talk about. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go ahead and issue a disclaimer in this video, just so we can go ahead and get the unwanted people out of the room right now. For those of you guys who say that you don't like to hear about racism being exposed, this is your opportunity to stop the video right now, unsubscribe, please don't come back, please. Because we don't want you here. You're not invited, okay? My message has never been for you racists. It's for the people that are against racism. Now, with that out the way, let's get into it. So with black people being the most magnanimous people in the world, it shouldn't surprise you that black boxers will go out of their way to extend their hand and praise Canelo Alvarez. And I'm going to get deeper into this and explain why they do this. But before I do, let's talk about what Gervonta Tank Davis said in response to Canelo Alvarez's knockout win over Caleb Plant to become undisputed at 168. So Gervonta Tank Davis, he said that Canelo Alvarez is me at 168. And surprisingly, Gervonta Tank Davis, he received an enormous amount of backlash from race fans. You would have thought that they would have said, you know what? Since this guy is praising our guy Canelo, we're going to give him a pass and we're going to exclude him from the rest of the black people that we don't like. You would have thought they would have did something like that, but it was the contrary. Instead, they completely trashed Gervonta Tank Davis, berating him by saying that he hasn't fought anybody. He's fought bums. And keep in mind, guys, the majority of fans saying these things are Mexican fans, Canelo fans, right? Now, and it's rumored that Canelo Alvarez actually responded to Gervonta by saying, yeah, but you got to fight better competition. Like pretty much saying the same thing that you hear the fans say. But I say it's a rumor because I looked everywhere and I didn't see anywhere where Canelo said this. But it was a couple of Mexican Canelo fans in my comment section that was telling me, why are you not talking about this? And I'm like, man, you must not know about me. I couldn't wait to go in on this because this gives me an opportunity to lay everything out as clear as day, to present all of the exhibits, which are all facts. But you better get your tissue out, Canelo fans, because you're gonna be crying your ass off, because that truth is painful. Man, it burns. Them Canelo fans, they'll tell you how much it hurts. With that being said, let's go ahead and break down the dichotomy. So once again, this man Gervonta, he gets trash for praising Canelo Alvarez and basically comparing himself to Canelo Alvarez. But he didn't say he was greater than, he just said that guy is like me at 168. Okay, he receives all the backlash. They all jump on him saying he hasn't fought anyone. Now, remember when I told you guys the majority of fans that are saying this are Mexican fans. It's funny because especially if you grew up on the West Coast, anywhere on the West Coast, you've heard many people probably say, you've heard Mexicans probably say once or twice, you know, boxing is a Mexican sport. We run this sport, right? Saying that they're the most dominant in the sport. So just think about this for a second. Let me ask you the question. Who does Gervonta Tank Davis exclusively fight? He's fighting nothing but Mexican and Latino fighters, right? I mean, hell, Gervonta Tank Davis is on a Mexican food diet right now. So to my Mexican fans, when you say he needs to fight someone, when you say he needs to fight fighters on his level or on a higher level, are you saying that Mexican fighters are inferior to black fighters? Because we already know that if there was a Mexican fighter that was fighting nothing but the best black fighters in his division, he didn't want to fight any white fighters. He didn't want to fight any Mexican fighters. He only wanted to go after the best black fighters in that division. Would anybody ever call him a cherry picker? Would anyone ever say, man, you need to step up in competition? They would never say that, right? But they say it when a black fighter is fighting nothing but Mexican fighters. I bet you guys didn't even think about it that way, did you? Because you were so quick to try to discredit Gervonta, you didn't even think about what you guys were saying. Listen, man, it is a fact that 95% of all of the greatest fighters of all time, I'm talking about from black to white to Mexican and everything else, at least 95% of the greatest fighters of all time, they have suffered their first loss to a black fighter. That is a fact. And when it comes to the Mexican fighters, at least 98% of the greatest Mexican fighters suffered their very first loss to a black fighter. If you don't believe me, go look up your favorite Mexican fighter and look at who he lost to. He either suffered his first loss to a black fighter or one of his most significant losses was to a black fighter. And the same thing goes for all of the greatest black fighters. The majority of the black fighters suffered their first loss to another black fighter. So once again, imagine if there was a boxer, a Mexican boxer, who was on a straight soul food diet. You dig? He wanted nothing but the best black fighters available. And he was beating them all, knocking them all out. Canelo fans, be real with yourself. Be honest in your heart right now. If that were the case, imagine a Mexican fighter doing that right now. And I was making videos saying, man, Canelo Alvarez, he needs to stop cherry picking. He needs to step up in competition because all he's fighting against is undefeated Mexican guys moving up to higher weight classes, knocking out bigger, undefeated black champions. What would you guys be saying? Oh, you're the biggest hater. You're the biggest hater on Canelo, right? This is what they would be saying. But speaking of them loving to use that word hater, do you guys notice none of these fans, and I'm talking about even outside of the Mexican fans, none of these fans have ever said, stop hating on Crawford. Stop hating on Gervonta Tank Davis. Stop hating on Andre Ward, on Floyd Mayweather, on Jaron Ennis. Stop hating on Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson. And the list goes on and on and on. You guys notice that? In fact, when it comes to a black fighter, they damn near are calling you N-word lovers if you're a fan of your own countrymen, right? You can't even be a fan of the man that comes from your own country because they are so racist. What do they say? Oh, you just like Floyd Mayweather. Oh, you just like Terrence Crawford. Stop riding Terrence Crawford. Stop riding Floyd Mayweather, right? Now, all of a sudden, liking someone is a bad thing. But when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, if you don't love him like I do, something is wrong with you. You got a problem. Because everyone knows that you're supposed to love Canelo and you're supposed to hate those black guys. That's exactly what they're telling you. But over here, it's never been about who you like and who you don't like. It's about the truth. The truth does not discriminate. I always tell you guys, when you come to my channel, you come into my doctor's office. You may not hear what you want to hear, but you're going to get the diagnosis that you're supposed to get. When you go to your doctor's office and he finds out you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or you got diabetes or whatever the case is, he's not going to tell you what you want to hear. He's not going to say, oh, no, your health is good, blood pressure's good. No, he's going to tell you the truth, regardless if you want to hear it or not. That's what you get over here. The whole truth and nothing but it. That's the reason why these races, they keep coming back. Think about it. You got the majority of old media saying exactly what these racists want to hear. Damn near saying that Canelo Alvarez is the greatest fighter of all time, greater than Ali, Mayweather, everybody, right? They're saying everything you want to hear, but you still come back over here. Why? Because you know what I say, it makes logical sense. You know that it's the truth. That's why you keep coming back. And that's why when these type of fans fill up my comment section, they never really disagree with anything that I say. The only thing they really always say is stop hating on Canelo. That's it. But going back to the comparison. So let's just say if it's true that Canelo did say, you need to fight better competition. Boy, oh boy, the irony of him saying that, or even the fans saying it. Who looks better right now, guys, in terms of fighting good competition? You have Canelo Alvarez that avoided all of the best competition in the deeper divisions at 154 and 160. He moves all the way up to 168. He waits for the best champion, David Benavidez, to be stripped of the title, and that's when he attacks. So while you guys said that this is a Mexican sport, the sport is dominated by Mexicans, Gervonta Tank Davis is fighting nothing but Mexicans and the best Mexicans. It's not like he's fighting against the weaker Mexicans, but avoiding, maybe the most dangerous Mexican, right? So while Gervonta is fighting all of the best Mexicans, who is Canelo Alvarez fighting? He's fighting all of the C-level white fighters. Because we can't even say they're even the best white fighters, because the best white fighters are fighters like Lomachenko and Josh Taylor. Those are the best white fighters, right? So once again, if you guys are saying that Canelo, or Gervonta Tank Davis rather, if you guys are saying that Davis, he needs to fight somebody, he needs to fight guys on his level or on a higher level, you guys are telling everyone that Mexican fighters are inferior to black fighters. Once again, you will never hear me say, or anybody, if in fact, every single time a fighter who's not black even beats a black fighter who's undefeated and has a name, the boxing world acts like that fighter just beat Goliath. Tyson Fury, for example, is a perfect example. They made a statue for Tyson Fury in the UK because he beat Deontay Wilder. But they didn't make a statue for him when he beat Vladimir Klitschko. You see what I'm saying? Because they know that, like I told you, statistically, the black fighter is the Goliath in boxing. Because the majority of the greatest fighters have lost to black fighters. That is a fact. That's not up for debate. Nothing I'm going to tell you in this video is opinion. It can all be researched. Canelo Alvarez, he had an opportunity to really, truly be one of the greats. Canelo is not even the greatest today. I've already told you this, and I've already used this analogy, and I'm going to keep using it. You can't go out there and only race against the slowest guys on the field and claim you're the fastest man in the world. It does not work that way, right? Anybody can be undisputed in the weakest division in boxing. Once again, why do you think Canelo Alvarez decided not to unify at 154 and 160? I had my reporter Skip ask Canelo the question, why didn't you unify at 154 and 160? Do you think Canelo Alvarez said because Demetrius Andrade is a horrible fighter? Do you think he said that? No, he didn't say that. You know what he said? He said, he started to stutter and he said, it's because of the promoters. He blamed it on the promoters, which proves that He didn't even believe himself when he said that Andrade is a horrible fighter. But once again, these are the code words that he uses when it comes to dangerous black fighters. If you want to really know if Canelo Alvarez feels that a black fighter is extremely dangerous, all you have to do is wait for him to say 2 words or use 2 words, either payday or horrible, right? When he uses those words, oh, we know what it is. That means Canelo is watching this fight and said, oh man, that's a bad boy. I don't want none of that smoke. Now let's go ahead and get back into, once again, why you have all of these black people that are praising Canelo Alvarez. The funny thing is, all of these fighters praising Canelo, from Devin Haney to Gervonta Tank Davis, and the list goes on and on. If they were in Canelo Alvarez's weight class, Canelo would be calling them horrible fighters. And he would be saying, they just want a payday. That is a fact. Canelo, he'll fight Abdi Yildirim. He'll fight Caleb Plant, Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, but then Demetrius Andrade, the man who has been chasing him for 6 years, only wants a payday, even though Andrade was the champion before Canelo was the champion. Canelo was his mandatory. How do you explain how the champion wants a payday? Oh, but you gave that payday to, what's his name? What was his name? I don't even remember his name now. Smith. Was it Caleb Smith? No, not Caleb Smith, his brother. Liam Smith, right? But you didn't mind making a payday with Liam Smith. Coincidentally, right after Andrade was stripped of the title, all of a sudden now Canelo wants to fight for that same belt, just like he did at 168. He didn't want to fight Demetrius. When David Benavidez was the champion at 168, he didn't want to be undisputed at 168. Now all of a sudden, the best fighter at 168, with the only fighter with power in the division, he gets stripped. Now you want to be undisputed. Did you guys know that Canelo also wanted to be undisputed at 160, but before Andrade became champion there? Yeah, he wanted to be undisputed there until Andrade became a champion, until Jamal Charlo became his mandatory. Then he said, forget that. Becoming undisputed ain't even that important. It ain't even all that serious. Canelo is on a white food diet, and you got the nerve to talk about Gervonta when he's fighting nothing but Mexican fighters, and I'm talking about the best Mexican fighters available? Can you guys name me one great? Can you name me one great fighter? I'm talking about from Sugar Ray Leonard to Ali to Floyd Mayweather to everyone. Can you name me one of the greats that completely avoided fighting the best undefeated black fighters and Mexicans and only wanted to fight against white/European fighters? Not Pernell Whitaker, not James Toney, not Roy Jones Jr., not Ali, not Floyd Mayweather, not Terrence Crawford. Canelo Alvarez is the only one doing this. We all know all of the top tier fighters would have beat all of those champions at 168 if they were all naturally the same weight. We know this. You put Jaron Ennis against all those guys. You put Terrence Crawford. Hell, you put Lomachenko against those guys. The only reason David Benavidez didn't become undisputed is because Caleb Plant did not want to fight David. Caleb really didn't want to fight Canelo, but Canelo just offered him way too much money. It was an offer he couldn't refuse. Same thing with Kovalev. Kovalev didn't really want that fight. It was an offer he could not refuse because they all turned down the fight. All of those white fighters turned down the Canelo fight originally. Canelo came back to the table and gave them more money because Canelo was like, you not getting away from this easy ass whooping I'm gonna give you. Canelo is the type of person that'll lower the basketball rim just to dunk it and claim that he won the dunking contest. Now let's talk about all these black boxers that continuously praise Canelo Alvarez. You know, the funny thing about it is, while a lot of black fighters are praising Canelo Alvarez, the majority of the greatest Mexican fighters of all time, they have pretty much corroborated every single thing that I've said about Canelo Alvarez and his selection of opponents. I always tell you guys, boxing is based on race, nationality, and pride in that order. You know, shout out to Aki, because I would always tell him before, I used to tell him that, 75% of these fans are racist. And when I talk about the fans, of course, we're talking about the non-black fans, because just like black people are only 12% of the population, they're a very small percent of the boxing fans as well. Now, the reason why it may seem like there's more black boxing fans is just because of the dominance of black boxers in the sport of boxing. So outside of the black boxing fans, I always tell you guys the vast majority of boxing fans are racist, hands down. And we know this just by looking at the racial double standards every day that you guys hear me expose and talk about. Now, shout out to Aki, because I was talking to Aki and he said something that really stuck, because I was telling him how 75% of these fans are racist. And he was like, nah, man, it's more like 95%. He said, the difference between you and me, Dante, is when you talk to these type of fans, they stay on code. They try to act like racism doesn't exist. What are you talking about, right? They just try to stick to their points, trying to defend non-black fighters and making it seem like it has absolutely nothing to do with race, why they praise all of the non-black fighters and not the black ones, right? He said, but when they talk to me, because I'm not black, they are open with their racism. They say the most racist stuff when they're talking to me. And I was like, wow, that makes a whole lot of sense, because I've always interpreted what these fans say in the comment section as what they really want to say about black people. And then Aki, he confirmed to me that is what they really are saying when there is no black guy in the room. And Aki's not the only person that told me this. I've heard many people say this, from white guys to Mexican guys, the ones that were not racist. They've told me these stories, how they'll be talking boxing with boxing fans. All of a sudden, just because they said something that could not be refuted, something true about a black fighter that makes him look good, or maybe they criticize someone who was not black, and then all of a sudden, that person, he will call that white person, he will call the Mexican, he will call whoever the person is that's not black, he will call him an N-word lover, right? I've been told this by multiple people. I've heard white dudes say, yeah, they've called me N-word lovers. They've called me wiggers. They call me all kind of stuff, right? Coincidentally, these are the same people that will post comments in the comment section saying, hey man, why do you got to talk about race? They act like talking about racism is their kryptonite. They act like you just pulled out a cross and some garlic to a damn vampire when you start talking about racism. That's because they are the ones we're talking about. And don't worry, guys, just bear with me, because I'm tying all this in with black people or black boxers that continuously praise the fighter that they say is the golden boy at the time, which is now Canelo Alvarez. But let me just make one more point about that staying on code. Now, Sean Zito, this guy is a reporter that works for Fight Hype. He turned out to be a racist. I thought he was a cool guy when I first met him, but then his true colors start coming out and he started making all of these Fox News type talking points defending Donald Trump when Donald Trump said there was good and bad on both sides when he was giving the Nazis a pass that was marching down in Charlottesville. In the comments that he made showing his disdain and disapproval for Colin Kaepernick getting a Nike deal by saying to me, well, isn't he doing this for all the people in the hood? How come he isn't giving all that money that Nike is giving him to the people in the hood? And actually, to quote him correctly, he used the word ghetto. So what he was really trying to say is, it shouldn't even really matter if these black people are getting murdered because they're just black people that live in the ghetto. That's what he was saying essentially. And I told him, I said, well, Trayvon Martin didn't die in the hood. He died in a suburban area. Matter of fact, a lot of these guys died in suburban areas. And that was the moment where I told him to his face, you're coming off as a racist now. And he said, I don't care, man. I don't care what people think. And I said, okay, good. So when I start calling you a racist, you shouldn't be offended at all because you don't care, right? Now, guys, this is the same reporter who interviewed Teofimo Lopez and was telling him, shouldn't Devin Haney have to knock out Linares to get a fight with you? This man was trying to create additional stipulations. He's trying to coach Teofimo into saying, yeah, He should have to do much more. That way, if he doesn't get a knockout, I can easily say, I don't have to fight him because he didn't get a knockout, right? But yet we all know that Kambosos didn't have to get a knockout to fight him. And we all know there's going to be tons of fighters that Teofimo is going to fight in the future that's not coming off of a knockout win. Hell, Canelo didn't even knock out Austin Trout to get the Floyd Mayweather fight. So why all of a sudden is this additional stipulation created by a reporter, right? And then this same reporter, Sean Zito, then he interviews Devin Haney. Devin Haney puts him on the spot. He says, who do you want to see me fight? Keep in mind, this is at a time where everyone is talking about Devin Haney versus Teofimo Lopez. This is at a time when Teo and Devin, they're going back and forth. Everything that they say about fighting each other, it gets views. This is at that time. So once again, Devin asked Sean, who do you want to see me fight? And this man didn't even say Teofimo versus Devin Haney. You know who he said? He said, I want to see you fight Gervonta Tank Davis. Of course you do. The lesser of two evils. While Teofimo gets to fight whoever he wants, you want to see the two black guys fight against each other. We know what time it is. And on top of that, he never said to Gervonta, shouldn't Devin Haney have to get a knockout to fight against you? Oh, because it's two black fighters, so he doesn't care. He doesn't care if he gets a knockout, if he looks horrible or whatever. Devin don't have to do nothing special to get a Gervonta Tank Davis fight. He ain't got to do nothing special to get a Shakur Stevenson fight either. Yeah, we know what time it is. So anyway, guys, everything that I told you about Sean. Now, this was after, like when he started talking about all this Donald Trump and this anti-Colin Kaepernick stuff, way before that, when I thought he was cool, I had him on my podcast. Matter of fact, I had him on my podcast about 2 or 3 times. Now, the one time he was on the show with me, it was interesting because he was staying on code. We started talking about the racial double standards, and naturally, he started to act like racism didn't exist at all. I felt like I was in that movie, The Sixth Sense, where I see dead people and don't nobody believe me, right? I see racist people and everyone is saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see it. You're just cuckoo. You're insane in the membrane. Something is wrong with you. So anyway, we're talking about the hatred that Floyd Mayweather receives, and he says it has absolutely nothing to do with race. We're going back and forth, right? It was funny though, because after we do the show, we talk off air, and then all of a sudden, I say it because I'm good at reading people. And I said, look, man, I know it's kind of hard for you to admit that the racism exists because you're afraid that a lot of the racist people, they're going to come after you. They're going to probably start calling you N-word lovers and stuff like that. And you know what he said to me? He said, oh, I've been called that. I've been called that multiple times. I've even been called that when I was talking about Floyd Mayweather. So wait a minute. So when we was doing this show, you were acting like this had absolutely nothing to do with racism. And then after we do the show, then you admit that you've had fans call you racial slurs just because you said things that were true about Floyd Mayweather or whatever black fighter? That's called staying on code, guys. He stayed on code long enough for the show to end. So the question is, why does he feel the need to stay on code? Well, obviously it has something to do with being a racist, but on top of that, there is an intimidation factor. You don't want to piss off the other races. Because I told you already, the majority of boxing fans are racist. Meaning, no matter what they say, it doesn't have to be true. It just has to be popular. It just has to be in popular demand. And this brings me to black fighters praising Canelo Alvarez. The bottom line is they are saying what they're supposed to say because, once again, this is the popular narrative. You see, these boxers are heavy into their Twitters and Instagrams and all that kind of stuff, and they want to be loved by everyone. So soon as you say something about Canelo Alvarez, those racist fans, they go in on you. They start filling up their Instagrams and all that kind of stuff. And those boxers are like, God damn, what did I say? Did I do something wrong? They automatically think that they're wrong for saying things that are true about Canelo Alvarez. Like Jermell Charlo is a perfect example. Before Jermell Charlo, he wanted to fight Canelo Alvarez. In fact, Jermell Charlo had been chasing, he was one of the three champions that was chasing Canelo at 154. Jermell, Jamal, and Demetrius Andre were all champions at 154, and Canelo Alvarez did not have a belt. And Canelo Alvarez, he refused to fight any of these guys. Talk about becoming undisputed. That's when being undisputed really means something, when you conquer a deep division like 154 or 147. So anyway, when Jermell was fighting at 154, he was an enemy to the Canelo Alvarez fans because he was a threat, because he was calling out Canelo just like his brother was. But then all of a sudden, years later, Jermell, he figured out that when he said anything positive about Canelo, no matter what it was, even if it wasn't even true, all of a sudden, the Canelo Alvarez fans, they loved the comment that he made. They didn't love Jermell Charlo, and they didn't like Jermell Charlo, but they liked the comment that he made, right? So Jermell, he said, wait a minute, this is working. Then he started getting bolder and bolder. He started realizing since they liked it, then he started coming out and said, hey, y'all, you guys don't even have to worry about me. I'm not even fighting in Canelo's division. You see, he said that because he understood, oh, so as long as I'm not a threat to Canelo, these fans won't attack me. Okay, then Viva Mexico. He started going on this channel or going on his live saying Viva Mexico and, hey, man, Canelo is the greatest, etc., etc. Why? Because he does not want to deal with the backlash, because you got to have thick skin to tell the truth all the time, because it definitely comes with repercussions. For example, all the years that I was criticizing Keith Thurman for not fighting Errol Spence, all the years I criticized Anthony Joshua for avoiding Deontay Wilder, and the list just goes on and on. I've always exposed fighters that were avoiding someone or whatever they were doing. I criticized them for it, and I was speaking facts. You think these fans ever cared? These Canelo fans, they never cared. They never cared if I was speaking the truth about other people. Or let me rephrase that, other black people. They didn't care. They only care when it's mainly a Mexican fighter or someone else who's not black that they happen to like at the time, right? This is why black people do it. This is why Gervonta does it and other black people do it. They don't want to deal with the backlash. Another great example, I remember Devin Haney was doing an interview with DAZN, Akin Barak, and he was asked, who's the best right now? And Devin Haney did not mention Canelo Alvarez. He said Terrence Crawford and left it at that. And then he came out of nowhere and said, what about Canelo? And then Devin said, oh, yeah, Canelo too. Yeah, Canelo, pound for pound, whatever, right? You see how they had to push him to say it? Because at the end of the day, it's not about saying what's true. It's about saying what the fans want to hear. Old media has a lot of power because they still have all of the numbers. Old media can tell you right now, Anoa'i. For example, Canelo Alvarez can lose right now, and they'll start saying Anoa'i is pound for pound, he's greater than Floyd Mayweather, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, you'll have almost every black fighter, when you ask them, who's the best right now? Anoa'i, right? Anoa'i. Every single time old media tells the boxing world who the best is, black boxers will often just repeat exactly what they say. If old media said it, it must be true, because the majority of people, they believe it. So it must be true, or it must be what they want to be true, right? You don't believe me when I tell you that these fighters, they will follow whatever old media says? Let me take you down memory lane. Do you guys remember Roman Gonzalez? Well, around the time that Andre Ward was considered pound for pound the best fighter in the world, I think this is when he kind of took a little bit of a hiatus and he was out of the ring. They start pushing for Roman Gonzalez to be pound for pound the best fighter in the world. And guys, this was before he even got a whole lot of exposure. This was before anyone ever really knew who he was. Nobody knew who he fought. Nobody knew any of the names that he beat. But all of a sudden, you would look everywhere and you would see #1 pound for pound. First, he was like on the top 10. First, he was like number 8. And I'm talking about, it seemed like it was only over months. He went from 8 to 6 to 3, and then he was #1. And the majority of these old media organizations had Roman Gonzalez at #1. And like I said, this was before we even knew one name that he beat, right? And I BS you not, reporters start asking Floyd Mayweather and Roy Jones, who is pound for pound the best fighter in the world? They both said Roman Gonzalez. When old media told them Golovkin was pound for pound the best, they did the same thing. They followed suit. Oh, who's the best? Oh, let me go ahead and open the magazine and look at it. Oh, there it is right there. Golovkin is the best. When it comes to Roman Gonzalez, I wouldn't be surprised if Roy Jones or Floyd Mayweather never even watched the whole Roman Gonzalez fight. Because I know even at that time, I hadn't watched too much of Roland Gonzalez. I just kept seeing his name pop up on the internet. And I'm like, who is this guy? And this is the reason why you're always going to get black people praising whoever is on top, at least on top of old media's list, right? But I guess Mexicans from Mexico, those fighters, you know, they're not worried about the intimidation because they continue to criticize Canelo Alvarez for cherry picking, taking on the weakest opponents. You flee from the deepest divisions, migrate to the weakest divisions just so you can call yourself undisputed. C-level white/European fighters that have no power. It's a joke, man. It's a complete joke. How sad is it? Floyd Mayweather, who was an old ass man, age 36, going on 37, he was 15 pounds smaller than Canelo Alvarez, and this man was walking down Canelo. And just to prove to you that it was the same Canelo Alvarez, Canelo fought Floyd the exact same way he fought Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders. First, he comes out slow. He tries to box a little bit with him, and then eventually he turns it up. He did this with Floyd Mayweather to no avail, right? The more he turned it up with Floyd, the more he got hit. But you know what was really disrupting Canelo the whole night against Floyd? It was Floyd's jab. The jab was offsetting him and forcing him to reset the entire night. So what's crazy to me is when you look at Caleb Plant, you got this 6'1" natural super middleweight, and this man is out there throwing this damn water gun jab. I mean, he was throwing the jab like he was afraid that something was going to come back and hit him. It was just this light touch jab. He would throw this like touch jab. See, the thing is, Floyd Mayweather, he'll throw a touch jab, but that's to set up a real jab, right? He'll kind of throw his arm out there as a touch jab, and then, you know, as he's moving his hand, you know, around from left to right, then all of a sudden he'll pop you with a real jab. But when it came to Caleb Plant, his touch jab was his actual jab. He didn't have a jab. And if you ain't got no jab, you're really in trouble against Canelo because that's his kryptonite. You know, Canelo Alvarez is a sucker for a stiff jab. You go back and watch the Kovalev fight. Matter of fact, go back and watch the Golovkin fight. That's how Golovkin won the rematch. Or at least the win that he didn't get credit for. We know what it is. At the end of the day, like I told you, I'm going to say it again. Gervonta Tank Davis fighting nothing but the best Mexican fighters available in his division. And matter of fact, his next fight might be the toughest of his career. He's going up against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. This is how you know it's all BS when you hear these fans trying to say that Gervonta fights nothing but bums, tomato cans, he cherry picks, etc., etc. We know that's BS because when Pitbull wasn't fighting Gervonta, these same fans were praising Pitbull, right? How many times did you ever hear Mexican fans say anything bad about Leo Santa Cruz? Did you ever hear any of them guys say, man, this guy is overrated. This guy is not that good. He gets more credit than he deserves. Have you ever heard them say that about Leo Santa Cruz? You didn't hear that, right? Mario Barrios, he was considered prospect of the year. Nobody said nothing bad about him. All of a sudden, soon as they know that he's most likely going to lose to Gervonta, now all of a sudden he's a trash fighter. These fans are forced to throw their own people or fighters under the bus just to try to discredit Gervonta, but it's not successful. Because once you said that Mexicans run the sport, hell, even if you said that black and Mexicans run the sport, you still can't criticize Gervonta for fighting nothing but Mexicans because by your own admission, you're admitting that he's fighting the best, right? You believe that he's fighting the best in that division. And when they say stuff like, oh, well, why doesn't Gervonta fight the other black guys? But the funny thing is, You had never praised these black guys before. You guys have never praised any of these black fighters, but now you want them to fight. There is no doubt, it's not even up for debate. Gervonta is fighting much better competition than Canelo has been fighting in the last 3 years, since 2018. The best fighter he fought since 2018 was Danny Jacobs, and that was the weakest black fighter out of the three. He had two undefeated black fighters in Andrade and Jamal Charlo, which we already knew that would have been a huge win if he could have beat one of those guys, the guys that have been chasing him for 6 years. But as I predicted before he fought Danny Jacobs, of course he's going to fight the one black guy who's already been knocked out before and has 2 losses on his record, right? But then after that, that was years ago, that fight. And then he went back to fighting nothing but white/European fighters. There's no way you could sit over here and say that you're fighting better competition than Gervonta when he's fighting your own countrymen and dominating and knocking them out. Canelo's supposed to be doing the same thing on the opposite end of the spectrum. With all these Mexican greats that have lost to black fighters, Canelo is supposed to be going after the best black fighters available. He's supposed to be going after the best fighters, period, regardless if they're black or not black. If that means going up to 175 for real challenges, if you're going to fight against nothing but white fighters, why don't you at least fight the best white fighters? Bivol, Beterbiev, those are real fights right there. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. I got a lot more to talk about when it comes to Canelo Alvarez. My next video, I'm about to talk about, of course, old media calling this man the greatest and et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to go deep into that and shut all that down. So it's going to be a whole lot more crying from you Canelo Alvarez fans. That's for damn sure. That's all I got for now, guys. On to the next one.
My name is Chris, and I'm all the way here from Anchorage, Alaska at ScalpCarolinas, and I'm here for my second treatment of SMP. Well, I was sitting at home one day and going over my Facebook page, and they have different, like advertisements popping up, and I saw one for SMP, and I saw some pictures of some guys, a before and after, and I was looking at that, and it caught my attention, so I Googled it. SMP, nothing showed up in my area. So, I did a little more research, and all of a sudden, ScalpCarolinas popped up in the web browser. So I started watching his videos and seeing all the reaction from all the other people. We talked on the phone, we made appointments and everything. I sent him pictures, and he looked at them, and I was like, can you fix this? And, he pretty much said, no problem. My first session, he made me feel extremely comfortable. It was almost like I was talking to family. He started, and during the whole treatment, we talked and, about our families and our life and, and things that he does and things that I do. And before I know it, the first session was over. When you see someone doing something that they love, as much as I see Enoch Glover love what he does, it shows in his work. I wouldn't point anyone in any other direction but here to North Carolina, ScalpCarolinas, to get this done.
All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called LO Decay Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to lodecay.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram.